I met her at a time when I wasn't even looking for anything serious. It was one of those random encounters that usually don't lead anywhere. But with her, it felt different almost immediately. She wasn't loud, didn't try to impress, didn't play any of the usual games I was used to. She was just calm. And there was something about that pulled me in. We started talking, at first casually, then more often, and somehow it just kept going. She listened, asked the right questions, remembered small details. Being around her felt easy, like I didn't have to prove anything or overthink what I said. The only thing that stood out, if I'm being honest, was that she kept a certain distance. Not physically, but something deeper. She wasn't cold or distant, just not fully open. Sometimes she'd go quiet in the middle of a conversation, like she was holding something back. And whenever I asked about her past, she'd shift the topic or give vague answers. It didn't feel like she was lying, just like there were things she wasn't ready to share. And I didn't push. Everyone has their own pace. But there was something else too. She often seemed tired. Not just physically, but in a way that felt heavier. Like she needed more time just to be present. Still, she never complained. If I asked if she was okay, she'd just smile and say she was fine. And I believed her. Because everything between us felt good. Maybe even too good. It just felt like I was only seeing the parts of her she chose to show me. And at the time, I didn't realize how much that actually meant. The more we spent time together, the more everything started to feel natural. We didn't rush anything, but it also didn't feel slow. It just moved. We'd meet after work, go for walks, sit somewhere for hours talking about nothing important, and somehow it still felt meaningful. She was attentive in a quiet way, the kind of person who notices things without making a big deal out of them. If I mentioned something once, she'd remember it later. Not in a showy way, just casually, like it mattered. And that made it easy to get comfortable around her. But at the same time, there were these small things that didn't quite fit. She never drank. Not even a little. At first I thought it was just a personal choice, which is normal. But the way she avoided it felt more intentional. Like she didn't want to explain why. There were also moments when she'd suddenly look exhausted, even if we hadn't done anything tiring. Sometimes she'd cancel plans last minute, saying she wasn't feeling well, but never going into detail. And the strangest part was how quickly she'd switch back to being completely fine, like nothing had happened. I didn't question it too much. People get tired, people have bad days. But over time, those small things started to repeat. Not enough to seem obvious, but enough to stay in the back of my mind. And even though everything between us still felt good, there was this quiet feeling that I was missing something important. Something she wasn't saying. At first I told myself it was nothing. Everyone has habits, things they don't explain right away. But the more time passed, the more those little details started to line up in a way I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just that she didn't drink. It was how she reacted around certain things. Strong smells would suddenly bother her. Sometimes she'd stop eating something halfway through like it made her feel off. And there were moments when she'd just sit there, quieter than usual, like she was trying to get through something without showing it. Still, she never complained. Never asked for anything. Just pushed through it. I remember one evening we were out. Nothing special, just a normal dinner, and she barely touched her food. When I asked if everything was okay, she smiled and said she just wasn't that hungry. But it didn't feel like that. It felt like she was avoiding something. Then she got tired earlier than usual and said she wanted to go home. I offered to walk her, but she insisted she'd be fine. The way she said it wasn't cold, just firm, like she didn't want me to come any further. And that stuck with me. Not because it was rude, but because it felt like a boundary that didn't match everything else between us. We were close, comfortable, open in so many ways, except when it came to certain parts of her life. And the more I thought about it, the more I started feeling like I was only seeing the version of her that she allowed me to see. After that, I started noticing how carefully she avoided certain topics. Not just her past, but anything that could lead there. If I asked about previous relationships, she'd give a short answer and then redirect the conversation back to me. If I asked about her routine, where she spent most of her time, who she saw outside of work, the answers were always vague, never detailed enough to build a full picture. And it wasn't obvious avoidance. It was smooth, almost unnoticeable if you weren't paying attention. But once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. There were also moments when she'd get slightly tense for no clear reason. Like if I mentioned something about the future or even made a simple plan a few days ahead, she'd pause for a second before responding, like she was calculating something in her head. I remember one time I joked about us taking a short trip together, nothing serious, just a weekend somewhere. Most people would either be excited or laugh it off. She didn't do either. She just smiled and said, "We'll see." But it didn't sound like uncertainty. It sounded like she already knew the answer and just wasn't saying it. And that was when the feeling really started to settle in. Not suspicion exactly, just this quiet awareness that there was a part of her life that didn't fit into the version of reality she was showing me. And for the first time, I started wondering if it wasn't just about privacy, but about something she was actively trying to keep hidden. After that, the feeling didn't go away. It just stayed there, quietly in the background, making me notice things I would have ignored before. The way she moved sometimes, slower, more careful. The way she'd sit back instead of leaning forward like she used to. Even the way she dressed started to stand out. Not in an obvious way, just looser, more covered than before. At first I thought maybe it was just comfort, maybe she liked that style. But then I realized it had changed gradually, not randomly. One evening, we were walking, and she stopped for a second like she needed to catch her breath. It wasn't dramatic, just a pause, but it didn't match how she used to be. I asked if she was okay, and she said she was just tired, like always. But this time it didn't feel like a simple answer. It felt like the same answer she had been giving over and over again, just with different words. That night, when I got home, I found myself replaying everything from the past few weeks. Not just one moment, but all of them together. The patterns, the small changes, the things that didn't add up on their own, but started making a picture when you looked at them together. And for the first time, a thought crossed my mind that I couldn't just brush off anymore. Not something specific, just a realization that whatever she was hiding, it wasn't small. After that, I couldn't pretend I wasn't noticing it anymore. It wasn't just small things adding up. It started to feel like I was missing something obvious right in front of me. I began replaying our conversations, thinking about all the moments she avoided, all the times she seemed just a little off but brushed it away too quickly. And then there were the physical details I had ignored before. The way she'd sometimes hold her stomach without thinking. The way she'd shift when she sat down, like she was trying to stay comfortable. None of it was obvious on its own, but together it started forming a thought I didn't want to fully say out loud. I remember one evening we were sitting close, just talking, and for a brief second my hand rested against her side. She tensed. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. Then she casually moved, like she was adjusting her position, and kept talking like nothing happened. But that moment stayed with me, because it didn't feel random. It felt like she was protecting something. And that's when the thought became clearer, even if I didn't want it to be. I didn't have proof. I didn't have anything concrete. Just a growing sense that there was something bigger behind all of this. Something she had been carrying since before I ever met her. And for the first time, I started wondering if I was already part of something I didn't understand yet. After that, the thought wouldn't leave me alone. I tried to push it away, tell myself I was overthinking, but once it's there, it doesn't just disappear. It keeps coming back in small moments, connecting things you didn't connect before. The way she avoided certain movements. The way she always kept a bit of distance physically, even when everything else between us felt close. The way she'd sometimes get quiet when I asked simple questions, like she was choosing her words too carefully. I started paying attention without meaning to, watching how she reacted, how she moved, what she didn't say. And the more I noticed, the more it felt like I was slowly catching up to something that had already been happening long before I realized it. One evening we were talking about nothing important, just random stuff, and I mentioned something about timing in relationships, like how things either happen at the right moment or they don't. She went quiet for a second, not uncomfortable, just still. Then she said, "Sometimes things happen at the wrong time, but you still try to make them work." It didn't sound like a general thought. It sounded personal, like she was talking about something specific that I looked at her, waiting for her to continue. But she didn't. She just changed the subject like it didn't matter. And that was the moment I stopped trying to ignore it, because whatever she was dealing with, it wasn't new. And I had a feeling I had just walked into the middle of it. A couple days later, it stopped being just a feeling. I was at her place for the first time, not planned, just something that happened after we spent the evening together. She said it was fine, that we could stay for a bit, and everything felt normal at first. Nothing unusual, just a small, quiet apartment. She went into another room for a minute, said she needed to grab something, and I stayed in the living area. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't trying to find something. But when you already have that feeling in your head, your eyes start noticing things on their own. There were papers on the table, not hidden, just there. Medical papers that I didn't mean to read them, but my eyes caught one word, then another, appointment, weeks, dates, and then I saw it clearly. Pregnancy. For a second, everything just went quiet in my head, like my brain needed a second to catch up with what I was seeing. I stood there, not touching anything, just looking, trying to convince myself I misunderstood. But the more I looked, the clearer it became that it wasn't something recent, that it wasn't something that started after we met. The dates didn't match that. This was already there, before me, way before me. And in that moment, all those small things finally made sense in a way I wasn't ready for. The tiredness, the distance, the way she moved, the way she avoided certain conversations. It all connected instantly. And the only thought that stayed in my head was simple and heavy at the same time. She knew. The whole time she knew. I didn't react right away. I just stood there for a second, staring at the papers like my brain was still trying to find another explanation. But there wasn't one. The dates were clear. This didn't start when we met. This was already happening before I even knew her. I heard her footsteps coming back, and I stepped away from the table like I hadn't seen anything, but my head was already racing. When she walked in, everything looked the same on the surface. Same calm expression, same tone, like nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. I tried to act normal for a few minutes, just to make sure I wasn't jumping to conclusions, but the thought wouldn't leave. Finally, I just said it. Simple, direct. Are you pregnant? She froze. Not dramatically, not like in movies. Just stopped for a second. And that pause told me everything before she even said a word. When she looked at me again, her expression had changed. No more calm, no more distance. Just something heavier. She didn't deny it. She didn't try to explain it away. She just nodded. And that was the moment everything shifted. Because it wasn't just that she was pregnant. It was that she had been this whole time. While we were talking, getting close, building something that I thought was starting from zero, she was already carrying something from before I existed in her life. And suddenly, all those questions I hadn't asked before felt a lot louder. Not just what was happening now, but why she never told me in the first place that I asked her why. Not in a loud or angry way, just why. Because at that point, the fact itself wasn't even the hardest part. It was everything around it. The silence. The fact that she let things move forward without saying anything. She didn't answer right away. She sat down, like the weight of the conversation had finally caught up to her. And for the first time since I met her, she didn't try to stay composed. She looked tired, not physically, just done holding it in. She said she didn't know how to tell me. That every time she thought about it, it felt like the moment would just ruin everything before it even had a chance to become real. She said she liked what we had, that it felt normal, and she didn't want to lose that before it even started. And then she said something that hit differently. She said maybe it wouldn't matter. That maybe I'd stay. That maybe I'd accept it. And then, almost quietly, like she knew how it sounded, she admitted that there were moments when she thought, maybe it could even be mine. That part didn't make sense logically. The timeline didn't match. We both knew that. But it wasn't about logic. It was about hope, or fear, or whatever you call it when someone tries to hold on to something that doesn't belong to that situation. And sitting there listening to her, I realized this wasn't just about her hiding something. It was about her trying to create a version of reality where everything could still work. Even if it wasn't fully true that I didn't argue with her. I didn't raise my voice or try to make it into something dramatic. I just sat there, realizing that whatever this was supposed to be, it didn't start the way I thought it did. It wasn't something we built together. I walked into something that was already happening. And no matter how much I tried to understand her reasons, that part didn't change. So I stepped back, quietly, without a scene. Because the hardest part wasn't even the pregnancy. It was knowing she let me get close without telling me the truth from the beginning. And once that's there, you don't really move forward the same way anymore.